Hello everyone, I'll be presenting on the case study for Module 6, Can't We Work This Out? Summarizing the case study, what's happening throughout this situation, this topic. The superintendent has got information from the state that there's going to be impacts on budget cuts for the school district. At the beginning of this, teachers were promised a 5% raise prior to the notification of the budgets at the beginning of the school year. And families are asking for the district not to change transportation for students. Funds are going to be looked at being allocated in different areas, and transportation does not want to be changed. This takes place in Oakwood Unified School District. It's in the Midwest community in the spring, and then this is taking place at the local school board meeting. People involved: the superintendent, building principals, teachers, district personnel, board of education, PTOs, and families. One of the key people in this topic is Mr. Jackson. This is Tyrone's father. Looking at Section 2, legal and ethical issues. Legal issues, negotiated agreement, of course. We talked about a 5% raise that was already voted on and approved by the board. And then, of course, changes to the budgets, which was already created at the beginning of the school year. Pay raises already promised to teachers, charging people for transportation that are willing to come from surrounding communities. And then ultimately impacts on athletic programs, music programs, and attendance. Section 3, synthesis of the problem. I'm going to read this out loud. The superintendent of Oakwood Unified School District must work through budget cuts at the state level to determine where additional funding may have been pulled from in order to possibly continue with the cost of living pay raise for teachers and free transportation for students. That's why the 5% raise was promised to teachers based on cost of living in the community. Looking at more of the facts within this case study, people, these are things we know: district administrators, staff and students, superintendent, building principals, district office personnel, teachers, community, PTO presidents. This is blue-collar backgrounds, majority of the community work, and then Tyrone Jackson's dad. Again, it's taking place in the Midwest community. Current time, spring of the school year, and this is taking place during the board meeting. The programs are going to talk about transportation for students K through 12 and public school setting, family engagement. To review and prioritize information, looking at stakeholder impact, critical stakeholders, and any additional information to make decisions throughout this case study as a superintendent. So potential damage when you look at stakeholder impact is not providing teachers with promised pay of that 5% promised pay that was negotiated on. And then, of course, the relation between the PTO and school, along with their support, could be tarnished, and including parents throughout the community. Stakeholder consultation, representatives be involved in locating areas for the budget cuts, looking at multiple people to help support where those funds can be allocated, and then particularly Mr. Jackson's dad being the voice of students and community members for transportation. Critical stakeholders is the district leadership teams, administrators, teacher representation, student representatives, and the board. Community members. There could be university representation as well, with a pretty good university about 30 miles away. Other areas to take in for additional information to make a decision, of course, is student achievement data and trends, policies that have already been passed from the Board of Education, budgets current and past. I'll talk a little bit about this later in the presentation, but looking at operations and management is a 3-year financial or fiscal year-to-date budgets, demographic information, possibly looking at other districts and surrounding areas of what this looks like as far as their cuts across the state and how they're going to allocate their funds differently, and ideas from district leaders throughout the school district. Potential options and consequences. So we look at option 1. Option 1 would be to make no decision and take no action on what's happening. Finish out the school year, the work can be done, and adjust the budgets without further involving anybody else. So as a superintendent and your board of education, having a conversation on what's going to be best for the district as you see fit through your lens, and having no other stakeholder involvement. Option 2, stakeholder involvement in decisions driven by data and evidence. We look at this piece, you're involving multiple stakeholders. There's input and transparency between all the different stakeholders in the community, internal and external stakeholders. There's adequate decision-making processes and put in place. That's probably part of your systematic and systemic processes across the district. Gathering multiple places or multiple sources to make these decisions. And having a consensus within the stakeholders and the teams to see what's best for the district and the current policies. Intermediate strategies, you want to first allow time for leaders to look deeper at budget, policies, and data. So you want to be able to give enough lag time in there to where everyone can review numbers and budgets and what this where funds could be allocated, not only at the district level but also in buildings. Form group of stakeholders, present information and collect feedback. So you're going to get multiple areas of community members, internal stakeholders as well, about where funds could potentially be budgeted. So this could be an informational item or information to inform the superintendent to make a better decision. And then ultimately consensus, which would help drive the decisions that are going to be made for the budget cuts in the next school year. Section 7, evaluating the options. When you look at option 1 and option 2, the pros of option 1 is you're going to allow for this de-escalation for the issue, just because you're not going to be talking about it too much. It's going to be de-escalating. There's quite a few cons to option 1. Of course, the pay for teachers. A lot of the community members and teachers rely on this money to live within the community, and with the increase in funding and the cost of living, they're probably banking on some of this money. And then ultimately the lack of trust because of the lack of district decisions being made district-wide on this topic. Option 2, all stakeholders are engaged in decision-making process. That's a huge win. Everyone's voice is being heard. There's learning opportunities for everyone, every stakeholder, internal and external, through this topic. Possibility of reallocating funds to different areas, and there could be consensus on where these funds are being allocated to. The cons within option 2 is the very timely process. There's going to be multiple means of communication, and there's going to be differences in opinions where those funds be allocated. This will be huge for whoever's facilitating these meetings to make sure that they're choreographing the meetings, that there's time for every voice to be heard, but also consensus throughout the group. Option 2, of course, is the best option when you look at this through the lens of a superintendent and the decisions they need to make district-wide for internal and external stakeholders. You need data to drive the decisions made throughout the district. You need multiple stakeholders to be heard with their own concerns and how it can affect their personal lives, but also people around them. You're building relationships with transparency, being transparent and honest. You're getting multiple means of feedback from internal and external stakeholders. You're reviewing and realigning current policies to the district vision. It provides time and research for districts on this topic. This could be a reoccurring event, not so much that there's decrease each year, but that districts can allocate funds and make a projected outcome for the next 3 years of what this could look like. There's intentional collaboration between all the necessary stakeholders, and the well-being and best interests of the students and staff are taken into consideration with option 2. Section 9, planning the implementation. This is going to take most of the work. When you look at the pathway, you want to collect the data, the information on the potential issue. Look at current policies that have been passed through the Board of Education. Look at the group of stakeholders. You want to determine who needs to be on that team to help provide that feedback and information. Allow plenty of time for communication and collaboration to build with this team. So you want to provide action plans, meeting dates, and outcomes for each one of these meetings. And third, of course, get approved Board of Education for any changes that the committee members come up with, that you can provide informational items and approval from the Board of Education. Plan B, with the help of board members or administrators, is find areas that budgets can be looked at in addition to this time that we're going to take working through option 2, because I said option 2 is going to take a little bit of time. You could look at communicating different policies and negotiate agreement. That could be coming up since it's springtime. What negotiations, what could happen through negotiations during this time. Of course, evaluate current funding to ensure districts is getting the best usage of their money, and making sure that they have enough to cover that through the next year. Is the district receiving any other funding? Like the last few years, we're receiving any ESSER funding or title funding that can be allocated for the use of this. Since it was a state deduction in budgets, maybe they have some areas they can adjust funding in that area. Section 10, operations and management. Really looking at communication through this process of operating and managing the district as the superintendent. Being transparent. Transparency is key to all stakeholders to ensure that the trust and relationships are continuing to build, and that you, the superintendent, has the best interests of students, staff, and community throughout this process. Make sure that you have projected yearly to date budgets. Where are you at this year compared to last year, and what are projected outcomes for the next couple of years, if not 3, and establish that budget allocation funds for the next year. Where can funds be pushed and moved into and allocated for the next year? And just making sure you have fiscal responsibility within your district, making sure that you're following up with all the new state and federal legislative movement, and if there is increases or decreases in budgets, to ensure that we're ahead of that. Be proactive, not reactive. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment. Thank you.